My name is Richard Sullivan, and at 68 years old, I thought I knew what betrayal looked like. I was wrong. Watching my son Marcus steal money from his mother while she battled Alzheimer's disease showed me a level of cruelty I never imagined possible. But what I discovered next, a secret that had been hidden for 20 years, gave me the perfect weapon for revenge. This is the story of how I turned a son's greed into his worst nightmare, and how sometimes the biggest betrayal reveals the most powerful truth. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. Trust me, you'll want to hear every word of this story. My name is Richard Sullivan, but everyone calls me Rick. I'm 68 years old and I live in Denver, Colorado with my wife Dorothy. We call her Dot. We've been married for 44 years, and she's been the light of my life since the day we met in 1979. I worked as an electrical engineer for 35 years, building a comfortable retirement for us. Between my pension, our savings, and the house we paid off years ago, we have about $3.2 million to see us through our golden years. Not rich by some standards, but enough to live with dignity and take care of any health issues that might come up. And health issues did come up. 2 years ago, Dot started showing signs of early-stage Alzheimer's disease. It began with small things, forgetting where she put her keys, repeating the same story twice in one conversation, getting confused about dates. At first, we both laughed it off as normal aging, but when she got lost, driving to the grocery store she'd been shopping at for 20 years, we knew something was seriously wrong. The diagnosis hit us like a freight train. Alzheimer's disease, early stage, but progressive. Dr. Martinez, our neurologist, was gentle, but direct. The disease will get worse over time. There are medications that can slow the progression, but there's no cure. The most important thing now is maintaining her quality of life and establishing strong support systems. Support systems, that's where our son Marcus came in. Marcus is 42 years old, married to Jessica with 2 kids, Chloe 16 and Brandon 13. He works as an insurance agent here in Denver, making decent money though not spectacular. When we told him about Dot's diagnosis, his reaction seemed perfect. Concerned, supportive, eager to help however he could. "Dad, you don't have to handle this alone," he said, putting his hand on my shoulder. "Jessica's a nurse, remember? She knows about these things. We're going to be here for you and Mom every step of the way." It was exactly what I needed to hear. Marcus had always been a good son. Not perfect, but caring and responsible. He'd had some financial struggles over the years, made some poor investment choices, but who hasn't? The important thing was that he was there when we needed him most. Or so I thought. Within 2 weeks, Marcus had organized our entire financial system. He set up online banking for all our accounts, created spreadsheets to track medical expenses, and established automatic payments for all our regular bills. Jessica helped by researching Alzheimer's care resources and finding specialists who might help slow Dot's decline. "Look at this, Dad," Marcus said, showing me a detailed budget on his laptop. "I've got everything organized by category. Housing costs, medical expenses, daily living, entertainment. This way we can track exactly where the money's going and make sure Mom gets the best care possible." The organization was impressive. Marcus had always been good with computers and spreadsheets, skills I'd never fully developed. Seeing our finances laid out so clearly was actually reassuring. We were spending about $3,000 a month on Dot's care between medications, doctor visits, and the part-time aide who came twice a week to help with her personal care. "The good news is that you can easily afford this level of care for years," Marcus said. "Even if the costs increase, you've got more than enough saved up. Mom can have the best possible care without any financial stress." That should have made me feel better. Instead, something nagged at me. Maybe it was the way Marcus emphasized how much money we had, or how his eyes lit up when he talked about our savings balance. But I pushed those thoughts aside. I was being paranoid, probably just stressed from the situation. The kids seemed to benefit from the new arrangement too. Chloe started spending more time with her grandmother, reading to her, and helping with simple activities. Brandon, though younger, was patient and kind when Dot repeated herself or got confused about who he was. "It's good for them to see this," Jessica told me one afternoon. "To understand that taking care of family is important. Even when it's difficult, they're learning compassion." It all seemed so perfect. Too perfect, as I would later realize. The first sign that something was wrong came in July, about 4 months after Marcus had taken over managing our finances. Dot was having a particularly bad day. Confused, agitated, unable to remember basic things like where the bathroom was or what year it was. Dr. Martinez had warned us that the disease would progress in stages, with good days and bad days, but seeing my wife of 44 years lost in her own home was heartbreaking. "I need to go to the bank," Dot announced suddenly during lunch. "I need to check on the children's college fund." "What college fund, sweetheart?" I asked gently. We didn't have grandchildren's college funds. That wasn't something we'd ever set up. "The money I've been saving for Chloe and Brandon, $500 every month, I need to make sure it's still there." I glanced at Marcus, who was visiting that day. His face had gone pale. "Mom, you're a little confused today," he said carefully. "You haven't been managing the bank accounts for a while, remember? Dad and I are taking care of all that now." "No," Dot insisted, becoming more agitated. "I go to the bank every month. $500 for the children. It's important." I'd never heard Dot mention any college fund for the grandkids. Given her condition, it was probably just confusion, her brain trying to make sense of fragmented memories. But something about Marcus's reaction bothered me. He seemed not just concerned about his mother's confusion, but actively nervous. "Marcus, is there any college fund for the kids that I don't know about?" "Of course not, Dad. Mom's just having a tough day. The disease makes people think they've done things they haven't actually done." That made sense. Alzheimer's could create false memories, or make people believe they'd completed tasks they'd only thought about. Still, the specificity of Dot's claim, $500 every month, seemed oddly detailed for a confused memory. That night, after Marcus and his family had gone home, I decided to check our bank statements online. Marcus had given me all the passwords and access information, so there was no reason I couldn't look at our own financial records. What I found made my blood run cold. There it was, in black and white on my computer screen. Every month for the past 4 months, there had been a withdrawal of exactly $500 from Dot's personal checking account. The memo line read, "Transfer to educational savings." But that wasn't the worst part. There were other withdrawals too. Small amounts, mostly minus $200 here, $150 there, $300 occasionally. Always from Dot's accounts, never from mine. Always with innocent-sounding memo lines. Medical expenses, therapeutic supplies, care assistance. I cross-referenced these withdrawals with our actual medical bills and receipts. None of them matched. We weren't spending an extra $200 on medical expenses, or $300 on therapeutic supplies. These withdrawals were for things that didn't exist. Over 4 months, nearly $6,000 had been taken from Dot's accounts in small, carefully disguised withdrawals. Money that was supposed to be helping care for my wife was being stolen by my own son. My hands were shaking as I printed out the bank statements. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I could barely process it. Marcus hadn't just seen an opportunity to steal from his sick mother. He'd engineered the entire situation to make theft easier. The help with financial management, the organization, the spreadsheet showing how much money we had, it had all been reconnaissance. Marcus had gained access to our accounts specifically so he could steal from them without being detected. But the most sickening part was the college fund story. Dot's confused insistence that she was saving money for Chloe and Brandon wasn't false memory caused by Alzheimer's. It was a real memory. She remembered giving Marcus money every month, because she had been giving Marcus money every month. He'd convinced his own mother, while she was losing her mental faculties, to regularly hand over cash for his children's education. Except the money wasn't going to any college fund. It was going straight into Marcus's pocket. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my home office, staring at bank statements, and trying to understand how my son had become a person capable of stealing from his own mother while she battled a devastating disease. The next morning, I called Marcus and asked him to come over. I didn't tell him why, just that I needed to discuss some financial matters. He arrived within an hour, as attentive and concerned as always. "What's going on, Dad? You sounded upset on the phone." I handed him the printed bank statements without saying a word. I watched his face carefully as he looked at the pages, saw the exact moment when he realized I'd discovered his theft. "Dad, I can explain." "Explain what?" "Explain how you convinced your mother to give you money for a college fund that doesn't exist. Explain how you've been stealing from someone with Alzheimer's disease." Marcus's carefully maintained facade crumbled instantly. Gone was the concerned, helpful son. In his place was someone I barely recognized. Defensive, angry, and caught. "It's not what it looks like," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "It looks like theft, Marcus. It looks like you saw your mother's illness as an opportunity to steal money from her." "I wasn't stealing. The money was for the kids, just like Mom wanted. I was setting it aside for their education." "Then where is it? Show me the college fund account. Show me where this money has been going." Silence. Marcus looked at the floor, his shoulders sagging with defeat. "I was going to put it in a college fund," he said finally, "but we had some unexpected expenses. Jessica's been having health problems, and my commission's been down this year. I was just borrowing it temporarily." "Borrowing? Did you tell your mother you were borrowing her money? Did you explain that her monthly college fund contributions were actually loans to cover your gambling debts?" His head snapped up. "How did you?" "I'm not stupid, Marcus. You think I haven't noticed the financial patterns over the years? The sudden requests for money? The, quote, investment opportunities that never paid off? The emergency expenses that kept happening every few months? You've had a gambling problem for years, and now you're funding it by stealing from your sick mother." The confrontation lasted 2 hours. Marcus alternated between denying everything, making excuses, and finally breaking down and admitting that he'd been taking money from Dot's accounts. But he insisted it was temporary, that he intended to pay it all back, that he was just in a difficult financial situation. "I love Mom," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I would never hurt her intentionally. I was trying to help the family, trying to make sure the kids had opportunities." "You were stealing from someone with Alzheimer's disease," I said coldly. "There's no excuse for that. None." Marcus left that day promising to pay back every penny he'd stolen. He said he'd get the money from somewhere, that he'd make it right, that it would never happen again. I wanted to believe him. Despite everything, he was still my son. But I also knew that trust, once broken this completely, could never be fully repaired. What I didn't know was that this was just the beginning of the truth I was about to uncover. After Marcus left, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of trusting his promises or hoping this was an isolated incident, I decided to investigate exactly how deep this betrayal went. I hired a private investigator named Sarah Chen, a former police detective who specialized in financial crimes and family fraud. I gave her access to all our bank records, credit reports, and financial documents, and asked her to trace every transaction involving our family for the past 5 years. "Mr. Sullivan," Sarah said when she called me 3 days later, "we need to meet in person. What I found is extensive." Sarah's office was a small, no-nonsense space downtown. She spread out papers across her desk like evidence at a crime scene, which, in a way, it was. "Your son has been stealing from you and your wife for much longer than 4 months, she began. "I've traced irregular transactions going back almost 3 years. Small amounts at first, minus $50 here, $100 there, but escalating over time. The scope of the theft was staggering. Marcus had been systematically skimming money from our accounts almost since the day Dot's symptoms began. He'd started small, testing whether we'd notice missing money, then grown bolder as Dot's condition worsened and her ability to track finances declined. In total, I estimate he's taken approximately $47,000 over the past 3 years, Sarah continued. He's been very careful to avoid detection, never taking large amounts, always using plausible memo lines, spreading the theft across multiple accounts. $47,000. Nearly $50,000 stolen from his own parents, with most of it taken from a woman who was losing her mind and couldn't defend herself. There's more, Sarah said grimly. I ran background checks on your son and daughter-in-law. Marcus has significant gambling debts, approximately $78,000 spread across various creditors. He's also been lying about his income. His insurance agency has been struggling for the past 2 years, and his commissions have dropped by almost 60%. The picture that emerged was of a man who'd been living far beyond his means, using his parents' money to fund a lifestyle he couldn't afford while his mother suffered from a devastating disease. But Mr. Sullivan, there's something else, something that might be even more significant than the theft. Sarah handed me a manila folder. Inside was a DNA testing report. I noticed some irregularities in your family medical records, discrepancies between genetic markers that should have been similar. I took the liberty of having some analysis done on genetic samples from the lab work your wife and son had done recently. My hands were shaking as I opened the report. The results were clear and devastating. Marcus Sullivan was not genetically related to Richard Sullivan. Marcus was not my son. The DNA results hit me like a physical blow. For 24 hours I couldn't speak, couldn't think, couldn't process what this meant. The man I'd raised, loved, supported, and trusted for 42 years wasn't biologically mine. But more than that, Dot had known. She had to have known, which meant that for 20 years, she'd kept this secret from me. The woman I'd loved and trusted more than anyone in the world had lied to me about the paternity of the child I'd raised as my own. Sarah gave me space to process the information, but she also provided context that helped explain the situation. Mr. Sullivan, I've done some additional investigation. In 1981, around the time your wife would have conceived, she was working as a substitute teacher. During that period, she had a brief assignment at Jefferson Elementary, working closely with the principal, a man named David Morrison. David Morrison. I remembered him vaguely, a charismatic man a few years younger than me, recently divorced, known for being popular with the female staff. Dot had mentioned him occasionally, always in professional terms, but I remembered thinking he seemed to pay her more attention than was strictly necessary. Morrison left Denver in late 1981, just before your son was born. He moved to California and eventually became a superintendent there. He died in 2019, so he's not available for questioning. But the timeline fits perfectly. I sat in Sarah's office, staring at documents that proved my entire life had been built on a lie. Marcus wasn't my son, which meant Chloe and Brandon weren't my biological grandchildren. The man I'd loved and raised and sacrificed for was not only stealing from me, he was living a life that belonged to someone else's child. There's one more thing, Sarah said gently. I believe your wife's Alzheimer's diagnosis might be why this information is coming to light now. What do you mean? Alzheimer's affects different parts of the brain at different rates. Sometimes, long-held secrets emerge as inhibitions break down and memories resurface in fragments. Your wife's insistence about the college fund, her confusion about money, it might not just be disease symptoms. It might be guilt and memory fragments about money she's been giving to Marcus, money she felt obligated to provide because of the secret she's been keeping. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Dot hadn't just been a victim of Marcus's theft. She'd been a willing participant, motivated by guilt over a 20-year-old lie. The college fund money wasn't stolen in the traditional sense. Dot had been giving it willingly because she felt she owed Marcus something for the secret she'd kept about his paternity. Marcus knew, he had to know, and he'd been using that knowledge to manipulate his mother's guilt, even as she lost her mental faculties to disease. Armed with the truth about Marcus's paternity and his systematic theft, I had a choice to make. I could confront him with everything I knew, demand the money back, and cut him out of our lives forever. Or I could do something more strategic, something that would ensure he paid for 20 years of lies and 3 years of theft. I chose the strategic approach. Over the next 2 weeks, I quietly gathered more evidence with Sarah's help. We documented every fraudulent transaction, every lie about his income, every debt he'd accumulated. We traced the stolen money to gambling websites, luxury purchases, and payments to creditors who were pressuring him for overdue debts. Most importantly, we discovered that Marcus had been planning something much bigger than simple theft. He'd been researching how to have me declared mentally incompetent so he could gain control of our entire estate. His increased helpfulness with our finances wasn't just about stealing small amounts. It was reconnaissance for a complete takeover. He's been documenting what he calls your declining mental state, Sarah showed me emails Marcus had sent to Jessica. Creating a paper trail that could be used to argue that you're no longer capable of managing your own affairs. The cruelty was breathtaking. Marcus was planning to have me declared incompetent so he could steal everything, while simultaneously stealing from his mother who actually was losing her mental faculties. But I had something Marcus didn't know I had. The truth about his paternity, and evidence of all his crimes. I spent 2 weeks crafting the perfect revenge. It had to be public enough to humiliate him, complete enough to destroy his ability to continue his theft, and permanent enough that he could never recover from it. The plan I devised was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its execution. I called a family meeting for Sunday afternoon, October 15th. I told Marcus it was to discuss Dot's worsening condition and make long-term care plans. He eagerly agreed, probably thinking this was his opportunity to push forward with having me declared incompetent. I invited Jessica and the kids, as well as Dot's sister Margaret and her husband Bill, who lived in Colorado Springs. I also invited Marcus's best friend Tom, who worked at the same insurance company, and Sarah Chen, who I introduced as a care coordinator who specialized in Alzheimer's families. Before we talk about Mom's care, I began once everyone was seated in our living room. I need to address some financial irregularities I've discovered. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but he maintained his concerned, supportive expression. Over the past several months, I've noticed discrepancies in our bank accounts, money that's been going missing, transactions that don't match our actual expenses. Dad, Marcus interrupted, we've been through this. There haven't been any irregularities. I've been keeping detailed records. Yes, you have, I agreed, pulling out a thick folder of documents, very detailed records, which is how I was able to trace exactly where our money has been going. I began reading from Sarah's report. Every stolen transaction, every false memo line, every dollar that had been taken from Dot's accounts while she battled Alzheimer's disease. The room grew progressively quieter as the scope of the theft became clear. Jessica's face went white. Margaret gasped audibly. Tom looked like he wanted to disappear. Even the kids seemed to understand that something terrible was being revealed. Over 3 years, I continued, Marcus has stolen approximately $47,000 from us. Most of it taken from his mother's accounts while she was losing her mental faculties and couldn't defend herself. That's not true, Marcus said desperately. I was helping manage the accounts. Sometimes there were transfers. Transfers to gambling websites, I interrupted, producing more evidence. Transfers to pay your debts. Transfers to fund a lifestyle you couldn't afford on your real income, which is about 60% less than you've been telling everyone. The devastation on everyone's faces was complete. But I wasn't finished. However, I said, setting down the financial documents and picking up the DNA report, theft isn't the only lie this family has been living with. I looked directly at Marcus as I opened the DNA testing results. 20 years ago, when you were 22 and getting married, you asked me to help with the down payment on your first house. I was happy to do it because I thought you were my son. Marcus's face had gone completely pale. He knew what was coming. But you're not my son, are you, Marcus? The silence in the room was absolute. Even Dot, who had been confused and agitated when the meeting started, seemed to understand that something momentous was happening. The DNA testing is conclusive. You are not genetically related to me, which means that for 42 years, I've been raising, supporting, and loving another man's child while being lied to about one of the most fundamental facts of my life. Jessica started crying. Margaret looked shocked beyond words. Tom stood up as if to leave, then sat back down. The kids stared at their father with confusion and growing understanding. Your mother knew, I continued, glancing at Dot with a mixture of love and profound sadness. She's known for 42 years that you weren't mine, but she never told me. And you, Marcus, how long have you known? Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came out. Based on your behavior over the past few years, I'm guessing you've known for quite a while. Long enough to feel entitled to steal from us because you figured we owed you something for the lie. Long enough to manipulate your mother's guilt about the secret she'd been keeping. I stood up, holding the DNA report. Your biological father was David Morrison, the principal your mother worked with in 1981. He's dead now, so you'll never get the chance to steal from him, too. The room erupted. Jessica was sobbing. Marcus was trying to speak but couldn't form coherent words. Margaret was comforting Dot, who seemed to understand that her secret was finally out. But I wasn't finished with my revenge. Now, I said, raising my voice to quiet the chaos, let's talk about what happens next. I pulled out another set of documents. Marcus, you have 48 hours to return every penny you've stolen from us, $47,000, transferred back to the accounts you took it from. If the money isn't returned by Tuesday at 5 p.m., I'll be filing criminal charges for elder abuse, fraud, and theft. Dad, please. I'm not your dad, I said coldly. I never was. But even if I was, what you've done is unforgivable. I turned to address the rest of the family. Everyone in this room needs to understand something. Marcus has not only been stealing from us, he's been planning to have me declared mentally incompetent so he could take control of our entire estate. He's been documenting what he calls my, quote, declining mental state and researching guardianship laws. Tom stood up. Marcus, is this true? Marcus finally found his voice. I was just trying to protect everyone. Dad's getting older, Mom's sick, someone needs to make sure. Someone needs to make sure you can steal $3 million instead of just $47,000, I interrupted. I handed Sarah a manila envelope. Sarah, please give Marcus the restraining order. Sarah stood and formally served Marcus with legal documents. Marcus Sullivan, you are hereby prohibited from entering this property, contacting Richard or Dorothy Sullivan directly, or accessing any of their financial accounts. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest. Marcus stared at the papers in disbelief. You can't do this. I'm family. No, I said firmly. You're not family. You're a thief who's been living a lie for 42 years, and that ends today. The following weeks were among the most difficult of my life. Marcus did not return the stolen money within 48 hours, so I followed through on my threat and filed criminal charges. The story made local news. A man with Alzheimer's disease being robbed by the person she trusted most, her own son. Jessica filed for divorce immediately, taking Chloe and Brandon and moving back to her parents' house in Arizona. She sent me a letter apologizing for not stopping Marcus's theft when she realized what was happening, but explaining that she couldn't stay married to someone who would steal from his sick mother. Tom, Marcus's best friend and co-worker, reported the insurance fraud to their company. It turned out Marcus had been falsifying client information and commission reports for months. He was fired immediately and faced additional criminal charges related to insurance fraud. The gambling debts Marcus had accumulated meant that even if he'd returned our money, he'd still be facing financial ruin. Without the stolen funds to make payments, his creditors began aggressive collection actions. Within 6 weeks, Marcus had lost his house, his car, and most of his personal possessions. But the most devastating consequence for Marcus was the complete destruction of his family relationships. Chloe and Brandon, who had loved their grandfather deeply, were horrified to learn that their father had been stealing from him while their grandmother battled disease. Neither of them spoke to Marcus after the truth came out. The paternity revelation meant that legally, Marcus had no claim to any inheritance from Dot and me. He wasn't our biological child, and his theft had voided any moral or emotional claims he might have made on our support. Within 2 months, Marcus went from being a seemingly successful family man to a divorced, unemployed criminal facing multiple felony charges and complete social isolation. Marcus's trial took place the following spring. He pled guilty to elder abuse, fraud, and theft, hoping for a reduced sentence. The prosecutor, District Attorney Karen Williams, was particularly harsh in her condemnation of Marcus's crimes. "Ladies and gentlemen of the court," she said during sentencing, "this case represents one of the most callous examples of elder abuse I've encountered in my career. The defendant systematically stole from a woman with Alzheimer's disease, a woman who trusted him completely and was unable to defend herself." She detailed every aspect of Marcus's crimes: the careful planning, the manipulation of Dot's guilt about the paternity secret, the fake college fund, the gradual escalation of theft amounts, and the plan to have me declared incompetent. "Mr. Sullivan didn't just steal money," D.A. Williams continued. "He stole peace of mind from an elderly couple during one of the most difficult periods of their lives. He exploited his mother's illness and his father's trust to fund his gambling addiction and maintain a lifestyle he couldn't afford." Marcus was sentenced to 4 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution of $47,000 plus interest and penalties. He was also prohibited from having any contact with Dot or me for the remainder of our lives. I attended every day of the trial. I wanted Marcus to see my face and remember that his crimes had consequences. On the day of sentencing, as he was led away in handcuffs, he looked at me one last time. "I'm sorry," he mouthed silently. I didn't respond. Sorry wasn't enough for 20 years of lies and 3 years of theft from a woman with Alzheimer's disease. After Marcus was sentenced, I was left to deal with the most difficult revelation of all: Dot's 20-year secret about Marcus's paternity. Even as her Alzheimer's progressed, she seemed to understand that the truth was finally out. During one of her more lucid moments, about a month after the trial, she looked at me with the clarity I remembered from our early years together. "Rick," she said softly, I need to tell you about David. Dot, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I should have told you 42 years ago. What she told me over the next hour broke my heart and healed it at the same time. The affair with David Morrison had lasted only 3 months in the spring of 1981. Dot was struggling with depression after 2 miscarriages, and I was working long hours on a major engineering project. She felt lonely, abandoned, and desperate for connection. David was kind to me when I felt invisible, she explained. He listened when I talked about losing the babies, when I felt like I was failing as a wife. It wasn't love, Rick. It was just comfort when I was broken. When she realized she was pregnant, David had already been offered the superintendent job in California. She never told him about the pregnancy, and he left Denver not knowing he had a son. I was going to tell you, Dot said, tears streaming down her face. I planned to tell you everything. But when Marcus was born, you were so happy. You held him and said he was the most beautiful thing you'd ever seen, and I couldn't destroy that joy. The lie had grown over the years, becoming harder to tell as time passed. By Marcus's first birthday, then his 5th, then his graduation, then his wedding, the secret had become too big to reveal without destroying everything. I was a coward, Dot said. I chose my comfort over your truth, and I've regretted it every day for 20 years. Looking at my wife, confused, fragile, losing pieces of herself to a cruel disease, I realized that anger was a luxury I couldn't afford. We didn't have many good days left together, and I wasn't going to waste them on bitterness about decisions made decades ago. I forgive you, I told her, and I meant it. You were in pain, and you made a mistake. But Marcus was never a mistake. Raising him was never a mistake. He became a mistake when he chose to steal from you. Dot smiled through her tears. You're a better man than I deserved, Rick Sullivan. We both made choices, Dot. You chose to protect my feelings instead of telling me the truth. I choose to love you more than I hate the lie. With Marcus out of our lives and the truth finally revealed, Dot's condition paradoxically seemed to stabilize. The stress and guilt she'd been carrying about the secret had been adding to her confusion and agitation. With that burden lifted, she had more good days, more moments of clarity. We used some of the restitution money Marcus was required to pay to hire better care for Dot. A wonderful woman named Carmen came to stay with us during the day, helping with Dot's personal care and giving me breaks to handle other responsibilities. Sarah Chen, the private investigator who had uncovered the truth, became an unexpected friend. She helped me reorganize our finances with better security measures and oversight, ensuring that no one could ever again gain unauthorized access to our accounts. You did the right thing, Sarah told me during one of our meetings. I know it was difficult, but Marcus needed to face consequences for his actions. Too many families cover up this kind of abuse because they're embarrassed or don't want to hurt the perpetrator. Most surprisingly, Jessica reached out to me about 6 months after the trial. She was getting back on her feet in Arizona, working as a nurse again, and helping Chloe and Brandon process what their father had done. Mr. Sullivan, she wrote in a letter, I want you to know that the kids ask about you and Mrs. Sullivan all the time. They don't understand everything that happened, but they know their father did something very wrong. They want you to know that you'll always be their grandfather in their hearts, regardless of DNA. That letter made me cry harder than I had since Dot's diagnosis. Chloe and Brandon had been innocent victims of Marcus's lies and crimes. They'd lost their father, their home, their sense of family security. But they still considered me their grandfather. I wrote back immediately, inviting them to visit during their next school break. Jessica agreed, and we began rebuilding a relationship that had nothing to do with biology and everything to do with love and choice. 2 years after Marcus was sentenced, I received a call from District Attorney Karen Williams. Marcus had been released from prison after serving 3 years of his 4-year sentence, but his troubles were far from over. Mr. Sullivan, I wanted to let you know that Marcus has been arrested again, insurance fraud charges in California, where he moved after his release. Apparently, he hasn't learned his lesson about honesty. The man I'd raised had become a career criminal, unable to live within his means or tell the truth about anything. The pattern of lying and stealing that had destroyed our family had continued, ensuring that he'd never have a normal life again. There's something else, D.A. Williams continued. Marcus has been trying to contact you and your wife. He's been telling people in California that you're his father, and that there was a misunderstanding about the money. He's apparently trying to use your reputation as a reference for employment and housing applications. I wasn't surprised. Even faced with overwhelming evidence of his crimes, Marcus had never truly accepted responsibility for his actions. In his mind, he was still the victim of circumstances, still entitled to benefit from relationships he destroyed through his own choices. "We've issued additional restraining orders," the DA explained. "He's prohibited from using your name or claiming any family relationship with you. If he violates these orders, he'll face additional criminal charges." I thanked DA Williams for the call and hung up feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness for the boy I'd raised and loved, who had become someone unrecognizable. Relief that Dot and I were protected from any further manipulation or theft. The final piece of justice came in the form of a letter from Chloe, now 18 and starting college. "Grandpa Rick," she wrote, "I wanted you to know that Dad tried to contact me when he got out of prison. He wanted me to ask you for money for his rehabilitation and housing. I told him that I would never ask you for anything on his behalf, and that he had forfeited the right to call himself our father when he stole from Grandma Dot." Chloe had been 16 when she learned the truth about her father's crimes. Now, at 18, she had the wisdom and strength to set boundaries with a man who had proven he couldn't be trusted. She and Brandon had chosen to maintain their relationship with Dot and me while refusing to enable their father's continued bad choices. "We love you and Grandma Dot," Chloe's letter concluded, "not because of DNA, but because you showed us what real family looks like. Real family doesn't steal from people who can't defend themselves. Real family doesn't lie for decades. Real family chooses love over money, every single time." Today, 3 years after Marcus's initial sentencing, Dot and I live quietly in Denver, with Carmen's daily help and weekly visits from a home health aide. Dot's Alzheimer's has progressed, but she still has moments of clarity where she remembers our life together, our love, and the strength it took to survive Marcus's betrayal. Chloe graduated from college last month with a degree in social work, specializing in elder abuse prevention. Brandon, now 16, wants to study law and says he plans to prosecute people who hurt elderly people. They visit us every summer and stay in touch through video calls and letters. Jessica remarried a kind man in Arizona who treats Chloe and Brandon as his own children. She sends us pictures of their new life, a life built on honesty, mutual respect, and genuine care for each other. The $47,000 Marcus stole has been fully repaid through the restitution order, wage garnishments, and seizure of his assets. But more importantly, the truth about his character has been revealed to everyone who knew him. He can never again present himself as a loving son or caring family man. His reputation, his relationships, and his future opportunities have all been destroyed by his own choices. Sarah Chen still checks on us monthly, ensuring our financial security and helping us plan for Dot's continued care. She often tells me that our case was one of the most satisfying of her career because justice was so completely served. Too often in elder abuse cases, the family protects the abuser, she explains. They're embarrassed, or they hope the person will change, or they don't want to deal with the consequences of prosecution. But you chose truth and justice over comfort and denial. That's rare. As I write this story, Dot is napping in her favorite chair, and Carmen is preparing her afternoon medications. I'm 71 now, 3 years older than when this nightmare began, but in many ways, I feel younger and stronger than I did before. Discovering that the son I'd raised and loved was stealing from his mother while she battled Alzheimer's disease was devastating. Learning that he wasn't biologically mine was shocking. But finding out that I had the strength to choose justice over family loyalty, truth over comfortable lies, was empowering. Marcus taught me that blood doesn't make family. Character does, choice does, daily acts of love and respect and sacrifice do. He shared my DNA for 42 years, but he was never truly my son because he never learned the values I tried to teach him. Chloe and Brandon, on the other hand, have no biological connection to me, but they're my grandchildren in every way that matters. They choose to love Dot and me. They choose to visit us, call us, include us in their lives. They choose to honor the relationship we built together, regardless of genetics. The money Marcus stole, nearly $50,000, was significant, but it wasn't the real crime. The real crime was betraying the trust of people who loved him unconditionally. The real crime was exploiting his mother's illness and guilt for personal gain. The real crime was planning to have me declared incompetent so he could steal our entire life savings. But sometimes the greatest crimes lead to the most complete justice. Marcus lost everything. His family, his freedom, his reputation, his future. He chose greed over love, lies over truth, and easy money over hard work. The consequences of those choices will follow him for the rest of his life. Dot and I, meanwhile, are surrounded by people who chose to love us despite everything that's happened. Carmen chooses to care for us with dignity and kindness. Sarah chooses to protect our interests long after her professional obligations ended. Chloe and Brandon choose to maintain their relationship with us, even though their father tried to destroy our family. If you're listening to this story and you have elderly parents or relatives, please remember, they deserve your protection, your respect, and your honesty. Their vulnerability is not an opportunity for exploitation. Their trust is a sacred responsibility. And if you're dealing with your own family betrayal, remember, you have the right to choose truth over comfort, justice over denial, and your own peace of mind over maintaining relationships with people who harm you. Family isn't about blood. It's about choice. It's about character. It's about choosing love over greed, truth over lies, and protection over exploitation. Choose wisely. Remember, respect isn't inherited, it's earned. Trust isn't automatic, it's built through consistent actions. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is refusing to enable someone's destructive behavior, even if that someone is family.